Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be another book recommendation video, and this time I'm going to be talking about dual timeline romance recommendations. I love dual timeline, especially when it's second chance. Actually, looking at this list, I think they're all second chance romances. I just love the sort of backstory that you get with the dual timeline. So without further ado, let's hop into the video. The first book that I want to recommend is The Roughest Draft by Emily Wimberly and Siegemund-broka. This is actually written by a married couple. They both had books previously to this, but this is their first publication as a writing duo, and I think that just adds to the story because it says even in the author's note that the author's little description here that they continue to take daily inspiration from their own love story when they're writing together. So I just think that just really adds to the story. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But this one is, it's sort of, I would say, like a combination of People We Meet on Vacation and beach read a little bit in the sort of style, but it's its own thing. The writing is absolutely beautiful. I love that both the characters are writers, so it just adds an element to the story. But anyways, let me tell you what this is actually about. So this book follows Katrina and Nathan, who were a best-selling author duo. Their first book that they published, it was like bestseller. Everyone thought they were going to be the next up and coming thing, but then just as all of this was as it was being released and everything, they suddenly had a really bad fallout and would just not tell anybody, not the press or anything, about why they split up. Now 3 years later, they still do have a book due, and for reasons that they both have their own reasons, they are sort of forced to write this second book together. So they go back to this small Florida town where they wrote their first book in hopes to get this done quickly and painlessly. But obviously they do have a lot to work through, and they sort of work through it as they're writing, with the different characters being like their own voices in a way, because the book is about a divorce that they're writing. So it's just a really interesting concept. The writing is actually really beautiful. I would say the only thing is, I think the reason why this gets like such low ratings and stuff like that is because it's not really a rom-com, which is what you think when you see this cover and when you hear it's much more literary fiction than a rom-com. It's still a romance for sure, but I think going into it, if you have that that notice that that you might like it more. It's very similar to like Emily Henry's books, where it's a little more literary fiction than a typical romance would be. But it is really well done. I really loved it. So I definitely recommend this one. The next book that I want to recommend is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I do have a physical copy of this book, but it's lent out to friends because I loved it so much and I forced all my friends to read it. It's very similar to Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, but I like this one a lot more. So this book follows Persephone and Sam, aka Percy. She used to spend every single summer at her parents' cottage in this small town, which was right next to Sam's cottage. And after some big mistake, she feels like she can never go back, but then she receives a call from Charlie, Sam's brother, and telling her that their mom died and that they're having a funeral. So Percy feels like she has to go back in order to give respect, because she absolutely loved that woman when she was there. She was like a second mom to her. So she finally goes back to the hometown and she has to confront Sam and all the things that happened with them. It's told over the course of the flashbacks, or over the course of 6 different summers, and the present is told over a weekend. And it's just, I loved this book way more than I loved Love in Other Words. I liked the conflict in this one a lot more than I liked the conflict in Love in Other Words. And also I love Sam and Charlie. I'm not sure if the new book by Carly Fortune is following Charlie, but justice for Charlie, I hope he gets a happily ever after because I really liked him in this book too. But also, if you're from Ontario and you haven't read this one, you've got to pick it up. The scenery that the author sets up, like it's very rare that you find romance books that are set in Canada in general, and let alone in a small town in Ontario. And I just thought it was so beautifully written. I felt like I was transported there, and it was really nice to read about a book that took place in a small town in Ontario. So I definitely recommend this book. If you liked Love in Other Words, check this one out. If you didn't like Love in Other Words, still check this one out. The next book I have to recommend is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is another one that is so beautifully written. Tia Williams, I need to pick up more books by her because this was really beautifully written. This is another one that's sort of more literary fiction rather than like a typical romance. So just know that going into it, don't expect like a typical rom-com. This is definitely way more literary fiction and way more beautifully written. So this one follows Eva and Shane. Eva and Shane are both writers in like the literary world. He is more of a literary fiction writer and she writes more erotica, and they basically meet up at this convention and immediately sparks are flying. But what everyone doesn't know is that they actually 15 years ago they had spent 7 days in June together, falling madly in love. So they are immediately hitting it off again, but they're also going through past traumas and their past, like the time they spent together previously. But it is just really beautifully written. So it is flashing back between the 7 days in June from 15 years ago and the 7 days in June in New York City while they're going through this literary convention and spending time together. And they're both looking for answers about what happened in the past, and they're both can't deny the chemistry that is still there between them. It's a really beautifully written book. I highly recommend. The next book I have to recommend is Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carolino. This is probably the first ever dual timeline book that I read, and I ate it up. I know this is a bit of an older book and it's very popular, but I had to include it because it's the book that really got me into this kind of like trope or kind of writing style, and I just really liked it. So this follows the female main character and the male character. They meet in college. They're actually in the same dorm while he's studying photography and she's studying some sort of music. I can't remember exactly what her instrument was off the top of my head, but it was some sort of, I want to say it was like the cello or something like that. It's some sort of string instrument, and basically they become fast friends, but for reasons they always were just like only friends, and then they became sort of more friends with benefits. But then when they graduated, they sort of went their separate ways in a way. While he was pursuing his photography career and she was pursuing her music career, somewhere along the way they lost communication, and then 15 years later they see each other across the platform as a train is leaving in the New York City subway. And it's such a cute meet cute. And so he posts online in order to try and find her. I really want to read more Renee Carolino books because I really like her writing style. But yeah, definitely recommend this one. Okay, and last but not least, I had to include People We Meet on Vacation because I feel like I have to include an Emily Henry book in every single trope video, even though I've definitely already recommended this one. Emily Henry only has 3 books, so I really shouldn't be including them in everything. But anyways, if for some reason you haven't picked this one up, it's a good one. It's not my favorite Emily Henry book, but it's a lot of fun. This one follows Poppy and Alex, who met in college, and they start going on trips together, and every single year they do some sort of trip together, but then they have some falling out, just like all of these second chance romances. And then a couple years later, Poppy is just really lost. She doesn't love her job anymore. She doesn't know, and she's trying to think back to when she was last happy, and she remembers she was always happy on her trips with Alex. So she reaches out to him to see if he would be willing to go on one last vacation together just to try and reconnect. A lot of things go wrong because she's doing everything on a tight budget, and it's really funny. This one is just so much fun. You really fall in love with Poppy and Alex. They are complete opposites, but somehow they are perfect for each other. So if for some reason you haven't picked this one up, definitely you should. Okay, and that's all the books that I have to recommend for you today on Dual Timeline. It's one of my favorites, but I haven't read a ton with Dual Timelines. But anyways, if you have any recommendations for books with this kind of style, let me know in the comments down below because I love it. I eat it up. So I am always on the hunt for more of these books. Subscribe if you're not already, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.